everyone, today is time for another tutorial in the Mini Gouache Painting series where we create these quick and pretty simple paintings that are perfect for anyone to try out. This time we are focusing on some summery flower paintings, and without further ado, let's start with this first one that will have a simple sunflower field. I'm using a watercolor sketchbook here, but any thicker paper would work for these paintings, and then I'll use my Holbein artist gouache paints. Here are all the colors I'll use for this first painting. All the tools and colors are also listed in the description. But as always, you will be able to mix very similar colors from pretty much any combination of blue, green and yellow tones you have at home. So if you don't own these exact same colors, don't worry about it too much. So we're starting by mixing the background colors first, and I decided to get the color of the sky out of the way. I wanted the sky to be very light and a bit grayish in this painting, so we are mixing a small amount of black paint into the mix of blue and white. I used this bigger flat brush to apply these background layers, but we won't be using it for anything else in this tutorial, so a bigger round brush would definitely work for this step as well. But other than that, I tried my best to keep the color as even here as possible, and we're applying it a little bit over the middle point of the painting. After that, we are mixing a somewhat medium green tone, and the green paints I have are all pretty bluish greens, not exactly what I often like to use for painting leaves, so I mixed a little bit of yellow ochre to get a more muted army green tone almost. Mixing a brighter yellow and a bit of black paint would do the same thing, so I always encourage you to test mixing different colors together at home to just see what happens. That's how you'll slowly learn to find the colors and combinations that pleases your eye. But anyway, we're adding this lighter green tone here first, and then mixing a darker green tone to the bottom part of the painting. You could mix these two greens together a little bit if you want, but it's really not necessary because the line will eventually be hidden with all the leaves that we'll paint on top of the ground. And that's actually what we are gonna start to do here next. There is really no strict order in which to paint all the elements here, so if you feel like it would be easier for you to start with the flowers first, you could definitely do that too. I just wanted to add some random leaves here first that will mainly blend to the background, but having this layered effect of leaves and stems is exactly the look that we are trying to achieve for this flower field. I realized that the green tones in the background layers could have been even darker, so that these lighter leaves would have stood out against it a little bit better, but if you add some dark leaves here and there, it will kind of end up having a very similar effect. So don't be afraid to mix many different tones of green here and layer them on top of each other. Also, the good thing about gouache is that you can always go over the first layers if you're not happy of the tone of color you chose. So the painting will probably look very strange at this point, but it will all come together after we get the flowers in place. So that's what we're gonna do next here, and I decided to start with the dark centers of the flowers. I actually added a tiny bit of burnt sienna to my painting palette to get this dark brown tone. I'm pretty sure I didn't show this color in the beginning, but going in with just black color would honestly work too. So I wanted to focus most of the flowers closer to the horizon line, and then it will probably look nice to have a few below and above the others. I also tried to make different sizes and change the direction of the flowers a little bit, which will probably make a little bit more sense when we add the yellow parts. And when we start to work with the yellow tones, you'll probably notice that to get the color to show up against the background, we'll need to use a little bit brighter tone against the sky and a little bit lighter yellows against the green leaves. I feel like the relativity of different colors is something I always find so interesting while painting. So again, you can test out different yellow tones here and see what works for which part of the painting. I also went over the yellow parts of the flowers with another round where I added some darker shadows towards the inner parts of the petals and also added some lighter highlights to some of the larger flowers especially. But after that, all we have left is to just keep adding leaves and stems here so that the field will eventually look like it's filled with flowers in different layers. There are no right or wrong moves here, so just keep testing out different tones and shapes and see what starts to look good to you. I feel like especially adding some very dark and very light leaves really helped to make the whole field look a little bit more dimensional. But after you're finally happy with the flower field, that's it for the first gouache painting of the day, and next we'll move on to this darker painting with some light rose flowers. I used many of the same colors as for the first painting, but just added a red and a darker green into the mix for the flowers and the background. So we'll start again by creating the background layer, and this time we are going with this very deep dark green shade. Eventually, I think you could go with a straight black here, but sometimes the difficulty of gouache paints is that the initial color might be a little bit different when it dries. So I felt like this color looked pretty dark here first, and then it dried just a little bit lighter. But anyway, we're letting the background layer completely dry before moving on to the next steps, which is to start painting the first leaves in the background. I wanted these first leaves to barely show up so that when we add some lighter tones on top, you can just see these very faint leaves in the background. Again, you might notice how the colors ended up drying a little bit different again, but I feel like that often happens, especially when we work with dark colors like this. I actually ended up covering almost the whole middle section with this lighter green here because I wanted the middle to be very highlighted against the darker corners, but I actually did go back a little bit later and added some darkness back to it. I really think that the key to this painting is definitely leaving those very dark areas between the leaves and flowers because it helps with the contrast and makes the lighter colors pop even better. But anyway, as you can probably guess by now, we are doing the same thing with the lighter and brighter green tones. So I'm just layering these simple leaf shapes all across the painting, but focusing mostly to the middle part for now. Then it's time to start adding the flowers, and I actually kept modifying these a little bit as I was going. So first we're gonna mix this very light grayish white tone and use it as the background layer for the flowers. I tried to make some different sizes and group the flowers a little bit so that nothing would look too symmetrical. And after the first layers, I started to add a little bit more color here. So first I was planning to make some light peachy and pink flowers, but I actually ended up covering most of the yellowish colors later because in some point it started to look a little bit too colorful and messy for me. But I also added some darker red color to the center of the flowers and kept layering some lighter colors on top of those two so that eventually it would look like there are these overlapping petals in the flowers. Nothing needs to be super detailed here, so just painting some messy shapes will definitely give you the appearance of roses. So as I mentioned, I wasn't completely happy how this was turning out for some reason. I feel like I should have considered the placements and colors a little bit better, but I just kept trying to define the colors and add more details everywhere, and I think eventually, even though this painting didn't maybe turn out exactly as I wanted, it was still good enough. Lastly, I added some flowers and leaves a little bit over our border. And again, I think it just made these flowers pop a little bit better against the background. But after all those small details in the leaves and flowers, we're finally done with the second painting. I really hope you'll give these a try and that they will teach you something new about gouache paints. And as always, if you'd like to see even more tutorials from me, I do have a Patreon where I share an extra tutorial every month with some other bonus stuff as well. So if that's something you'd be interested, the link is in the description. But I think that's all for this time. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having an amazing day or night wherever you are, and see you in my next one. Bye bye!